On this day, Friday, the 24th day of February 2023, before the Court of the Citizens of the World, with the Honorable Judges, Zach Yakub, Priya Pillai, and Stephen Rapp. And in the matter of the file number TCCW1, the Office of the Prosecutor versus the accused, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. This court is now in session. Please be seated.
The time has come to deliver the final decision of the court.
The ICC statute of aggression, 8 bis, is based on the United Nations Charter, specifically Article 2.4, which prohibits all states from threatening or using force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The first question that we need to ask and answer is Ukraine independent and its borders universally recognized? If it weren't independent, then it wouldn't be entitled to have its independence protected. Its independence, its sovereignty, and its borders were guaranteed by a declaration in the Budapest Memorandum of 1995, by which it gave up the right to possess nuclear weapons and disposed of those weapons that were on its soil. And that particular declaration, the guarantee of its independence, sovereignty, and its existing borders, including Crimea and the Donbass, was agreed to and signed by the Russian Federation. Next question I think we have to deal with is, does the qualification that an act is an act of aggression, does that require some decision by a UN political body? Article 39 of the UN Charter says that the Security Council shall determine the existence of an act of aggression. Such a determination was asked by members of the Security Council, 11 of them, on February 26th last year, and the Russians vetoed that declaration. But there was an alternative under the UN system, under the so-called Uniting for Peace precedent that came from a General Assembly resolution in 1950, that where the Security Council is blocked, the General Assembly can move ahead with necessary declarations. And the General Assembly did that on the 2nd of March in the resolution offered to us yesterday by the prosecutor, and which was voted by a vote in the General Assembly of 141 yes and only 5 no. We want to thank the prosecutor for their careful presentation of the evidence, the 16 witnesses, the other documents that they placed and exhibited to us and that we accept. They specifically, in their indictment, found that, or stated that there were 5 of the 7 kinds of acts of aggression in the Rome Statute that were alleged here: attack or occupation on the territory of another state, bombardment of the territory of another state, blockade of the ports or coasts of another state, attacks by armed forces of one state on the armed forces of another. It's important to note that Mr. Putin does have defenses. It would be his job to raise those at trial. However, the prosecution is required to seek and present exculpatory evidence, and it can bear on our determination of whether the evidence as a whole is sufficiently substantial to merit confirmation.
While the crime of aggression is not new per se, it has not been prosecuted since the trials at Nuremberg. This is an opportunity to address some of the legal complexities in the crime of aggression. At this stage, the confirmation of the charges, it is to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to establish substantial grounds that a person has committed the crimes as charged. But much more than this legal determination, the hearings this week have given an opportunity to survivors to come forward with their account of what has happened to them and how they have coped with what can only be described as cataclysmic events in their lives. We thank them for their courage, fortitude, and determination to bear witness. They have spoken to us of the terror of the invasion and the upturning of their lives. They have told us their stories of extreme loss and pain, which no one should have to go through. They have been witness to and have experienced detention and captivity, torture, filtration camps, witnessed close family killed before their very eyes, and have described in detail the destruction of civilian infrastructure and the impact of this invasion on their lives. There is no doubt from the witness testimony, as well as the documentary evidence provided to this tribunal, that the invasion was of such a scale, gravity, and character as to constitute the crime of aggression that has violated the UN Charter. The attacks on Ukraine were spread all over the territory of the country, starting in the east and south, and enveloping much of the country subsequently. The ferocity and manner of the attacks, including artillery, aerial bombardment, ground troops, tanks, left no doubt as to the intentions of the invasion. Furthermore, the attacks were not restricted to military targets. There was rampant targeting of civilians, both in the initial days of the invasion as well as in the occupied areas. The killings, detention, torture, the use of civilians as human shields, of conflict-related sexual violence, all indicate an egregious violation of international law and expose the character and manner of the invasion to be the ultimate crime of aggression. The planning, preparation, initiation, and execution of these acts of aggression can be clearly laid at the doorstep of the leadership of the Russian Federation, and specifically that of the president, who exercises total control over the political and military action of the state. More than sufficient evidence has been adduced to the effect that the key decision maker was one individual, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia.
Thank you very, very much. Judges Rapp and Pillay, it is now my turn. And before I read the order, I will make a few comments. The first comment to make is that this court, the judgment of this court, has no legal force or authority. That doesn't mean, however, that it is useless. This court has the force of moral persuasion, and hopefully the evidence heard here and the judgments delivered here will resound in the international community in an effort to persuade immediate action, which is the best we can hope for. The evidence here and the judgment that we deliver must not be understood as supporting one ideology over another. Thirdly, I'd like to set out my general approach, which may be a little different from my colleagues, but my approach is that it is common cause in the first place that there was an incursion, there was a horrible incursion into the territory. There has been no denial of this. Indeed, President Putin has been boastful, and his justification can only be described as nothing but pathetic and absolutely hugely manipulative. Fourthly, we have been moved considerably by the suffering of tens of thousands of human beings, of which we have heard samples. The hearings have been long, they have been emotionally absolutely exhausting, but we had to do our duty. And we must say that we express our grave sympathy with the population of the country in the hope that things will resolve itself and there will be some kind of justice. The Court of the Citizens of the World, sitting at the Spanish court in The Hague, has heard credible evidence of substantial grounds that the Federation of Russia used grievous and destructive armed force against the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Ukraine, and confirms the indictment presented to the court by the Office of the Prosecutor pursuant to the statute of the International Criminal Court and the authority of the rule of law, in that Vladimirovich Putin has committed more than 1,000 instances of the crime of aggression. These constitute, in particular, contraventions of Article 8 bis A, B, C, and D, which have been particularized already, of the ICC statute and the authority of the rule of law. President Vladimirovich Putin, through his de jure and de facto power and authority, in a position effectively to exercise control over or to direct the political military action of the Russian Federation, planned, prepared, initiated, and executed, and continues to plan and execute the Russian Federation's acts of aggression in the Ukraine. The court accordingly, A, finds that there are substantial grounds for an indictment to be issued against President Vladimirovich Putin for more than 1,000 instances of the crime of aggression committed against the people of Ukraine from about January 2021 or earlier until the cessation of Russian hostilities. B, issues an indictment against President Vladimirovich Putin for contraventions of Article 2.4 of the Charter of the United Nations on the basis already set out in this decision. And C, calls upon and urges the United Nations, the European Union, and all the governments and peoples of this world to take every step necessary to ensure that a court with legal powers issues an indictment against President Vladimirovich Putin and takes appropriate measures to arrest the perpetrator and put him on trial in an official Ukraine tribunal as soon as possible. So the work of the People's Court has been concluded. We adjourn not to reconvene again until and unless the exigencies demand.